you're doing well. Welcome back to another video. This is my 20 worst books of 2024. I'm going to rank it from the one I liked the most to the one I liked the least. If that makes any sense. I've done it 20. This year didn't really have like too many that I like actively hated. Like they were like below 2 stars. I didn't like quite a lot of, but there is some saving grace to some of them. I'm gonna try and not be too slow in talking about them. Also, I got this new like ring light, which I thought was quite like fun, but I feel like my phone's falling because like I can't like do my proper setup anymore. But like I don't know if it's too bright. I think it's okay. Also, it is absolutely freezing today in the UK, so I've got my snuddy on. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started with these books that I didn't like. And to get us started, we have Love Me Tender by Constance Debray, translated from the French by Holly James. This is a 3-star read. I didn't actively hate it. I just wanted to fill the number of 20, and this was the worst of my 3 stars. This, I didn't actually have too like that many like high expectations going into it, but I did see quite a few people like it at the end of 2023, and that's for that reason and of what it was supposed to be about. I put it on my 2024 most anticipated like reads list, and it did under deliver. It was quite underwhelming. It's basically sort of auto-fiction following Debray a few years after she split from her husband, and they have a child, and she has started seeing other women, and it sort of centers on a custody battle over her son, and trying to like get time with him and things like that, which is a very vicious, horrible to read custody battle. It is really harrowing, and the way her ex-husband sort of taught their son to say like, oh, bad things about her and who she's associated with and stuff like that. And I do feel like it does portray the sort of lesbophobia within the French courts and the mistreatment of women as well, in quite like a not a good light, but like it does portray that well, and just that relationship. But on the other hand, it's quite hard to feel for her at times as well, because of the way she does sort of like think about and talk to other people, and the sort of like ideas that she's like, oh, I'm sort of like, I don't mind not having my son anymore because now I have all this other time for doing other things stuff. And it's unclear if it's like as a response to not having the time with her son, or because she actually wants that. Sort of like sexual liaison she has and stuff is a little bit crude at times, but it's not like excessive. And additionally, her and some other characters do use the F slur, and she is a lesbian woman, or a woman that likes women. For her to use them without sort of any, you know, comeuppance is a little bit annoying. The writing is well done. It's quite concise at times, but also it is equally messy, and it does feel a bit like diary entries, and just ones I didn't really care to read about. So yeah, I personally wouldn't really recommend this book. I am definitely intrigued to read her previous book within a sort of like a trilogy called Playboy, but that was translated after this into English, even though that was released first. I do have that. I would like to read that, and then I'll probably see if I will ever check her out again, but after this I probably wouldn't have. But anyway, I need to stop being so slow talking about these books because we need to get into this. The next one we have is Boulder, which is a 2.75 star, by Eva Balthazar, translated from the Catalan by Julia Sanchez. This is part of her triptych. This is the second one. The first one I read, Permafrost, in 2023, and I did actually quite like the book quite a lot. But this like, it's well written. It's basically following like a lesbian woman that is sort of, she was working on the ships in like Argentina, and then she sort of falls in love with this Icelandic woman, I believe. I feel like this lighting is a little bit too bright. She falls like in love with this Icelandic woman. She sort of goes to Iceland and follows her there, and they sort of like trying to work out like having a family and stuff. And it's sort of centered on like their sort of like miscommunication and this sort of like all-consuming love apparently, but I didn't get a sense of that. I just felt like it was just like why are you not saying what you need to say, and why aren't you doing the things, and sort of like, why are you doing this to yourself when like it doesn't really seem that like either of you truly like love each other that much. So yeah, I didn't really get the hype of this at all. I know a lot of people really love this triptych, but yeah, I wouldn't really recommend this. And the more like I've thought about it after reading it, I've just been more like irritated with it, and like, why did I continue reading it? But yeah, that was that. Yeah, this year is quite annoying for translated books. Like, quite a lot of translated ones didn't hit at all, and usually I love translated fiction, but yeah. By the way, this might be long. I hope it's not going to be too long, but get yourself a drink if you want to, and some snacks too. And now we go on to number 18, LMNOP by Mark Dunn. I only recently read this. This is one of my first of my 2.5 stars. This has a really good concept. It's just lacked its execution, I would say. It's following like letters between Ella and her cousin, I can't remember, and they live on the island of Nollop, and this is named after Nevin Nollop, who came up with the phrase the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog, which uses all the letters of the alphabet. And then over time, each letter sort of like is falling from the epitaph, and then the government are saying like, oh, this means Nevin doesn't want us to use these letters anymore, so they sort of like make it illegal to use these letters in sort of talking and like writing and thinking in a sense. And then as the book is compiled of letter correspondences, as you go further along in the book, as each letter is not available, the author can't use them in the letters because that is what they're trying to do. Do you know what I mean? So it is like clever, the idea, but it just was a little bit, I don't know, a bit boring at times. They're also trying to come up with their own like phrase to challenge the original one, and sort of like the undercurrents of like, you know, trying to break free from this oppressive regime. And it does talk about sort of like the impact of sort of like totalitarianism, and the way what like government says and stuff like dictates how people think and do things and things like that. So yeah, I guess it is kind of worth reading, but I didn't really like it, and I probably wouldn't recommend it. There's also sort of like a love story that's just a little bit irrelevant. Number 17 is The Moustache by Emmanuel Carrère. This is translated from French by Lanny Goodman. This is basically following a man that shaves off his moustache he's apparently had for over 10 years, and then his wife is just like, let's go to dinner, and then his friends are like, oh, how have you been, and stuff like that, and his work colleagues and stuff are just like, oh, here you are. Basically nobody sort of is like concerned or like notices that he has shaved off his moustache he's had for so long. Only he knows it, and he thinks that maybe his wife is trying to like play a trick on him, or other people, and he's sort of like thinking like, am I going mad? Is she going mad? Is this sort of like happened and that led to that, and then that led to that, and that's the reason for this, and stuff like that. Sort of is examining that, and it sort of explores his sort of like descent into madness in some sense. Quite like and relate to this sort of desire to get away from life, not by suicide, but sort of just like leaving what you're doing currently right now because it's sort of getting a bit too much, and sort of like just like going around somewhere else, and you know, stuff, things like that. And yeah, it does sort of like get under your skin. It's a bit creepy, well, not creepy, but like weird, like you're saying, what is going on here? And yeah, like it's well written, but on the whole it was a little bit frustrating. And also there is homophobia on page 2, which just like left a bad taste in my mouth, and the end is made me very, very uncomfortable because scenes like that have always been an issue for me. But yeah, this one I probably would maybe say to give it a read because it is quite strange and like absurd, but it wasn't necessarily enjoyable. But yeah. Number 16 is the poetry collection Let the Light Pour In by Lem Sissay. I did read this physically earlier in the year, but I have since unhauled it. Each one is like about 4 lines long. Just explore sort of like light and day and things. It basically was all supposed to be written like in the morning when he woke up. And there is some semblance of like mental health and sort of like letting like light overcome the darkness and things, but they do read quite simplistic, and from like the 30% mark onwards they are quite monotonous, I would say, and just sort of rehash the same thing. So yeah, I was sort of expecting a little bit more, but I wouldn't really recommend this book. It was fine. It was fine. Next is the experimental memoir Dear Queer Self by Jonathan Alexander. I haven't written my review for this yet, and a few other ones, so I haven't fully pondered my thoughts. But I remember that it was quite good at telling like his like life sort of like at university, and sort of like coming more of himself within his sexuality and exploring parts and stuff like that, which wasn't too bad. I think it's like set like in like New Orleans, somewhere like near there, and then also going into work, I think. But yeah, I found it was a little bit monotonous, and it didn't really add anything to the sort of the conversations around it, about sort of, you know, like growing up in the South queer, and sort of anything that much. I can't really remember, if I'm being completely honest. All I know is that like I found it fine. But yeah, that was that. Number 14 is one of the first books I read this year, From a Low and Quiet Sea by Donna Ryan. This was in my 50 self-destructs books. I think I read 2 of them. Bad me. This is split into 4 parts. The first 3 follow like one like male main character in a contemporary setting in Ireland, and then the 4th one is sort of like how their lives are interlinked in a way. The first is Farouk. I think I enjoyed his most. He is sort of like moving from war-torn Syria to Ireland, and sort of like the immigrant experience, and sort of like leaving his family and things. The second is sort of about sort of regretting things that you sort of didn't like, hadn't have done and stuff. And then the third one, I forgot the names. This like guy is sort of like trying to repent on things that he's done in the past. And yeah, like it's well written. The audiobook is very, very good. I would definitely recommend the audiobook over the physical book if you was going to read this book. I wouldn't really recommend it at all. Because it is like multicast, and they do really like put a lot of emotion into their narrations. And it explores sort of like a contemporary experience from these men's lives. Yeah, but I feel like some of the main problems didn't really outweigh that. Is that you're sort of meant to feel some empathy towards some of them, and I didn't really get that too much. Also, there's fat phobia in like each section, that by the third one I'm just like, this is enough of it now. Just, you know, why? It's 2018. You don't need to keep using fat phobia in like books, and especially when it's not addressed and it's not you know, challenged, which is just very, very, very frustrating. And also all the female characters sort of are very, very one-dimensional. They're sort of used as sort of like a means to an end in some sense, and not really treated that well, and it just sort of annoyed me. So yeah, I would like to check him out again. I do think he has a potential to, you know, be maybe a 5-star author for me, because I do love Irish contemporary fiction, but from this, no. But I will give you a second chance. Next is the manga The White and Blue Between Us by Kiyohiko, translated by Leo McDonough. This is following 2 characters, Hizuma and Mishima, and they sort of like had sort of like a little like a relationship in night school, and then one of them sort of ends it and leaves, and then a few years later is when the book is set. He comes back and is sort of like build a sort of like a second chance romance in a way. I do feel like it did explore sort of like it's like queer coming of age in a sense, and sort of like not accepting who you are, and like sort of being shamed by society in a way, leading you to do certain actions that you don't really want to do. But on the whole, it was quite fast paced. Also there's like a sex scene that just sort of like comes right out of the blue, and I'm just like, what is going on here. I missed like 20 pages, and then it sort of just pulled me out of the story. I feel like the flashbacks were definitely much better than the actual story, but that was that. Number 12 is This Is How You Lose a Time War by Emma Almota and Max Gladstone. This is sort of like a time travel-y romance letter sci-fi thing, basically following two characters, Red and Blue, and they start sort of like sending each other letters in like these weird formats, and they sort of go from sort of like enemies to frenemies to friends to lovers, and that is a book saving grace, is that these parts are sort of, I guess, well done, but yeah, also it's well written, but the content is so confusing, and it's both confusing in like, what on earth is going on here, why is this happening, how is it happening, and for what reason, yeah, I sort of felt a little bit stupid reading this, I would say, because of this, and very little things are sort of explained to you in a way. It just sort of, I don't know, I really didn't like this book too much. I feel like it is probably should be lower on this list, but I do sort of maybe need to rejig some of my ratings, but yeah, it sort of stuck with me, and I did feel like the romance was sweet, but it was just so confusing. I wish I DNF'd this so early on, because I didn't need to put myself through it, and yeah, I wouldn't recommend this at all, if I'm being completely honest. I do know a lot of people love this, like love it, and they have it like on their favorites of the year and stuff, but I'm really like, that's not me, love. Maybe I just don't have the brain energy to comprehend sort of this book, but yeah, I don't know, would not recommend that. But 11 is Leah on the Offbeat by Becky Albertelli. This is the second book in the Simon Verse series, but it's the third one in the Creekwood sort of like setting in a way. So yeah, this is following Leah, who is one of Simon's friends from Simon Verse the Homo Sapiens Agenda, which is the basis for the film Love, Simon, which is one of my favorite films. I read all of the books in a video earlier in the year if you want to check out more of my thoughts. I might put some links to some of the other ones that I talk about these other books in, if I remember to do so check the description for that. And also, while you're here, like and subscribe if you want to, and make any comments on what was your worst books of the year, or any thoughts on the ones I'm talking to you about. I need to get better at doing that, because I don't do that. Back to the book. Yeah, I didn't like this. I haven't read my review yet, but all I remember is that she is just not a very nice person. She felt so like off, like, I mean, she is meant to be off, but also the other characters as well, and the way she reacts to someone telling her something very important, she just makes it all about herself, and I just really hated that, and that isn't addressed as well, and things like that just really annoy me, and yeah, I can't really think of my full thoughts on this, but I wouldn't recommend it at all. Bottom 10, It Lasts Forever and Then It's Over by Anne DeMarkin. I can't really tell you anything much about this book. It's so confusing in a similar way to This Is How You Lose a Time War. Why are things happening? What is happening? How? All those questions. Yeah, it's about sort of like a woman that is possibly dead, thinking over like a past love in some sense, which I did like, and the ways we grieve and stuff. It also talks about these people that are like thinking about like what happens after life in a sense, maybe, possibly, I don't know. I've forgotten nearly everything in this book, and it took a long time to read, even though it is quite short, but yeah, Nah. Then we have Vinegar Girl by Anne Tyler. This is part of like the Hogarth Shakespeare retellings, and this is a retelling of The Taming of the Shrew. It's following Kate. I think she's 29, and her father is like a scientist, and she asks her to basically marry his assistant Piotr, so he can like stay in the country and they can finish their research. And it's sort of basically about, will she do this, won't she? Only really Kate is a character that is explored in the book. The rest don't really have too much to them. I guess some parts of the story I just don't like, just because they're based on this story, which I haven't read, by the way, but in a sense she is tamed, and that just didn't sit right with me, especially after a few certain events. Also there is sort of like xenophobia, which is explored in sort of like the immigrant experience in like contemporary America, but Tyler does like pander to stereotypes as well, and it just didn't really sit right with me. Also, like, there's quite a lot of talk about like animal rights and sort of testing and veganism, but that like sort of hold these views are sort of belittled and sort of portrayed as like bad and like the baddies of the book, and it sort of lacks any nuance that the topic deserves, and it is sort of quite anti-vegan in a way, and yeah, I didn't really like it. I wouldn't recommend it. I will check out Tyler again. I forgot to say, but since this is How You Lose a Time War, all of these have been 2.25 star reads, and including this one. The next, Farewell Cowboy by Olga Savicevic. This is translated from the Croatian by Celia Hawksworth. This is another book that had a lot of potential, but personally I felt like it was wasted. It's basically following Dada, and she is returning home to Split from Zagreb. It's just set in like just after the 2010s, and her brother Daniel had apparently died by suicide like a few years like before she left, and her mother sort of like wants her to come back and stuff, so she goes back, and while she's there she's trying to like, well, this says that she's trying to uncover what happened to Daniel, sort of like who he was involved with. Was it a suicide? Was it maybe something more? But that isn't really what we get from the book. I don't really know. I don't really get anything in a sense. I think the best part of the book and what sort of saves it from being any worse is that it does explore sort of Split in the contemporary light, and also Croatia after the like Yugoslav wars, and it explores sort of like the town and how there is sort of a divide between sort of like the touristy parts and like the new sort of bits, which are different from the old settlement, which are sort of where the poorer families live, the native residents of the city, and sort of like how there is a bit more community there, but it is sort of a bit more impoverished. But yeah, the writing is so like stop-start. It's clunky. It's not a very nice reading experience, and it did at times feel a bit like diary entries of quite a boring, monotonous person. Not to sound rude, but that's the truth. It didn't really achieve what it set out to do. There's also a part where the narrative like shifts, where it's called like westerns whatever, and I absolutely despised it. It was like about 30 pages, but it was just horrid. I wish I DNF'd this so much earlier, but I was reading it for a video, my Eurovision one, so I had to continue it. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend this at all, really. Number 7, we have The Godmother by Hannah Claret, translated from the French by Stephanie Smee. This, with all the rest of them, are all my 2-star reads of the year. This is following a woman, I think she's called Patience, and she is sort of a police interpreter from sort of northern Arabic dialects, or like Morocco, Algeria, and she intercepts sort of like recordings of sort of like gang drug sort of crimes and stuff, and then tells the police sort of like what's their plans are. But she's entering like retirement age, and it's all been sort of like under the table sort of work, so she doesn't like really have any, you know, set up for the future. And then she finds out that a large stash of Moroccan weed has like been hidden somewhere, so she becomes this godmother person, and decides to, you know, take it and start selling it herself, and that's sort of basically the story. I really didn't like this main character. I think she's a very nasty person. There is some reason to some of the things she does, but on the whole, she just like the way she talks and thinks about people and the way she uses people is just nasty, especially her mother. And like a specific part that I remember where her mother like has told this story a few times about when she was escaping from the Germans, I believe, and like her dog died, and she's just like, oh, why is she telling us again, like, oh, can't wait to kill her and stuff like that. And I was like, hun, that's your mum. That's your mum. She's like telling you about her trauma. It doesn't matter how many times you've heard it. She is your mother, and she's telling you about a traumatic episode. Like, stop being so horrible. And yeah, there's some other parts as well. Also, like it's fiction, I know, but like some parts are really unrealistic. Like being like, oh, like you need to say thank you to sort of like these drug traffickers, like gang members and stuff. I'm like, hun, what are you talking about? It also makes sort of like drug trafficking and selling quite a reputable career in a way, when like it's not. It doesn't talk about any of the negatives, like about like, you know, like gang violence and sort of like addiction and other problems with drugs at all. And yeah, it was just a bit silly. And yeah, I just really did not like this book. I really badly wish I didn't have it, but again, I was reading it for a video. Like more of what's coming up, including the next one, The Lover by Marguerite Duras. This is translated from the French by Barbara Bray. I'm so annoyed at this. I was expecting a lot more, because a doomed love French fiction, it has my name written on it. I'm bound to like it, but this was just really like irritating. It's basically following essentially the main character, the author, when she was younger in French Indochina, Vietnam, and her relationship with an older Chinese man that is sort of not allowed, and that's part of the story, this lover. But a lot more is actually about her relationship with her mother and her strangely abusive older brother for some reason. It's never explained why. And there's inconsistent time jumps. The writing is good, but it's, you know, jumpy and clunky in a sense, or like it, do you know what I mean? Like the formatting, I guess, is weird. And yeah, she also sort of like makes the Chinese man sort of quite weak. It does talk about sort of like the place of women, and also like racism and xenophobia present at the time, but not really that much, or in a very good light. And then also later in the book, she sort of becomes this like child character apparently, and it's not a direct quote, but basically it's sort of like, he took me like he'd take his own child. And I'm just like, Marguerite, where's this come from? No, disgusting.
In 1 years, disgusting.
I'm sorry, why? Like, why? No, thank you. I would not recommend this at all, and I'm sort of put off by reading anything else by her again, so sorry. 5, and we're starting with Death and the Penguin by Andrei Kurkov. This is translated from Russian by George Bird. It's basically following a man that has a pet penguin in Kiev. For some reason, we don't really know how, and it is never really questioned why he has a penguin in the middle of Kiev, like it's the most normal thing to happen. Okay. And it's sort of set like post USSR, and sort of like gang crime and stuff, and basically the main character, Victor, right, is that his name? think so. He is sort of like a writer of like obituaries, and then his employer tells him to start writing them for people that haven't died yet, like high profile people, and then people start dying, and then sort of people are after him in a way. I find it's very, very like irritating, just like the way things went along. It didn't really make sense. Things just sort of happened and then not really talked about anymore. And yeah, a lot of this book just irritated me. The writing is very clunky, and I don't know if that's to do with the translation or the actual writing of the original. And yeah, I didn't like it. Quite a few parts. Also, the characters aren't really that explored or had that much to them. I quite like Sonia, who's a little girl he's like taken care of. Obviously Misha's fine, and then I think it's like Sergey, I think he was okay. I can't remember the name though. And yeah, it does sort of like talk about sort of like the place of Kiev in Ukraine at this time, sort of like gang and mafia crime and like lack of services and sort of like paying sort of like underhandly to get basic services. But yeah, on the whole, it was very, very irritating. I would not recommend it. I'm actually unlikely to read anything else by him again, but I might do so. Another book that I really don't wish to be this far down the line, but it's the poetry collection Witch by Rebecca Tamas. This is just here because it's so incomprehensible to me. I took it to be that like there's spell poems and then there's other ones like witch as so and so, and I sort of felt like they were taking us from sort of like the time of witch trials to the modern day, and they're just using sort of like a person sort of talking about like the treatment of women and stuff in a way. Some parts were like fine, but a lot of it, like I said, is just incomprehensible. My brain could not understand what's going on here. But yeah, some are fine. I think there's one like Witch Europe and like Witch Trial or something maybe that were fine, but yeah, it's such a nice edition as well. But I don't have anything else to say about that other than I did not like it and I would not recommend it. Bottom three, and we're with Mammoth by Eva Balthazar, translated from the Catalan by Julia Sanchez, the third in her triptych. This started off good. It's well written like the whole triptych is, but then like here where I stopped underlining, which I wish I didn't do because I could have like sold this, or give it to a charity or whatever. It just gets horrible. It's so horrible. This woman leaves Barcelona, sort of like for like a farm and stuff, to sort of like get away from modern city life. Just like I understand you there, love. But also she's a lesbian woman and she's actively trying to get pregnant, and it felt a little bit predatory, some of the things she did. And some parts that were just, I don't know, just really no. And then the bit I stopped it at, she starts with this like cat murder, and then there's just so much animal cruelty and animal death in this book that I just despise at the best of times, especially when it's not like addressed or not sort of like talked about any of the negatives or anything like that at all. I just absolutely hate it. I hate things like that so much, and this has had too much of it. And yeah, I don't see what people see in these books. Yeah, it was a very, very horrible reading experience, but the writing, I guess, is okay, and some of the parts are alright, but yeah, would not recommend this at all. Number 2 is The Bloody Chamber by Angela Carter. This is a collection of short stories. There's supposed to be sort of like a feminist retelling of sort of like folk and like fairy tales, but I didn't really get that. They didn't really add anything new. I feel like a lot of the time the female characters are sort of still at like the beck and call of men and put down. Some of them do sort of have this sort of like sexual agency, But yeah, yeah, I didn't really like it. Some were fine. I think the Titicular won a bloody chamber, and there's also another one that were like 3.5 star reads. The Lady of the House of Love. But a lot of them were just not good. Especially one. There's one in here, The Snow Child, which is the worst thing I have ever read, ever. Worse than Herland, that utter piece of crap from last year. It's just so disgusting. It sort of gave me Snow White-esque vibes. It started amazingly, by the way, but then basically this guy, he sort of thinks of having a child, I think, and then this child comes and then dies, and then he rapes the child, the dead child. For what? I'm sorry, what? Miss Angela, your brain went there. Why? Disgusting. Disgusting.
Disgusting!
No, horrible, vile. I think the average was like a 2.23, but I manually dropped it down because I ain't having that. Would not recommend this at all. I have really been put off reading anything else by her because also the writing is just a little bit like it's fine. Like it's not like nothing to write home about. Like it's just like whatever. But I know a lot of people do really like her, so I might do, but not for a very long time. But the next one I do want to read more by him, but again probably not too soon, and this is the worst book of 2024, The Chronicle of a Death Foretold by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. This is translated from Spanish by Gregory Rabassa. I just really didn't like this book. I was reading it for a video. It's basically this guy is telling a story of the murder of one Santiago Nazar about 20 years ago, I think, then when the it's supposed to be set. And he's come back to the town, this small Colombian town, which it does paint a good picture of like the impact of religion and social standing, and the way like if someone has done so and so to your family, that's like, you know, put a bad press on you, and like you have to sort of do something to get this off of you in a way. And also talks about sort of like racism and xenophobia apparent like in this small town. But that's the storyline. So he basically does like little interviews with the people in the town about what they knew was going to happen on the day Santiago was murdered, and all of them basically say the exact same thing. They all blend into one. It's like A said so and so to B, who I'm related to via C and D, or I know, and then they went along and told F, who was like, oh, I also know that, like I've been told by Z and E. So they're all basically related. They all say exactly the same thing. They all knew that this murder was going to happen, but nobody did anything. And it's just so frustrating. It's so annoying to read. I absolutely hated it. The writing is also very clunky. Again, I don't know if that's a translations problem or the original one. And yeah, I just did not like this book really much at all. But it's not like terrible. It's just very bad. So yep, that is my worst book of the year. I'm so annoyed that so many of them are translated because like usually it's my jam, but whatever. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and stay tuned because coming soon will be my best bits of the year, which I'm excited to film possibly later today. We shall see. But anyway, have a nice morning, even night wherever you are in the world, and I shall see you very soon. Bye.